Most clinic owners hire more physios because they think they're going to generate more profit in the long run. The reality of the situation is that many clinic owners find that hiring more therapists in the long run actually drains their profits and they end up working more hours as a result. In this video, I'm going to show you how to train up your new grad physios without you having to work 60 plus hours a week. But most importantly of all, protect your profit margin in the long run so that when you hire another therapist, the clinic's profit margins continue to grow and not just the number of patients or revenue. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Dave O'Sullivan. I've worked in international sports as a sports physio for over 17 years. And I've been very fortunate. I have my own clinic here in Huddersfield in the north of England. And I've been in Australia and I've been in Japan on 2 occasions where the hiring process has actually happened and the onboarding process of new therapists while I was on the other side of the world. And I also have the unique viewpoint of having mentored over 1,500 plus therapists all over the world, transforming them into go-to physios through our therapist mentorship program. So I've seen a lot of therapists who are very, very coachable. And I've also been able to spot quite quickly who isn't coachable and who would or would not be a good hire. Now in this video, I want to show you how you can make sure that when you hire a therapist, you're not just increasing your patient numbers and your revenue, but actually you're also increasing your profit. And that's where we have to look at what are going to be the critical factors that really contribute to a great onboarding experience that makes sure that the therapist has the real skills needed to generate profit ethically for your clinic. So when we look at hiring a therapist, I've covered this in numerous videos already. We need a high will therapist, and we're happy to take a high will therapist that has all the right core value fit for the team and is demonstrating all the right traits, but has a little bit less skill. We want to take a therapist like that any day of the week over a therapist that's got low will, but maybe a higher skill level. And very often a lot of therapists, they won't have the actual skills needed to thrive and ethically generate revenue in private practice and hit the head physio numbers. So whether we like it or not, we're going to have an onboarding process, and that becomes really, really important. The onboarding process is the time, and usually for us here, it's about 6 weeks where we can take a new grad therapist and then we can transform them into a highly skilled private practice clinician where they're hitting our head physio numbers are very, very close to hitting them within the first 6 weeks. That's our big milestone of an initial assessment rebook rate of around 90%. They can convert packages of care at around 50%. Their cancellation did not rebook rate is less than 8%. And then their patient visit average, as that gets up into the 90-day mark, it's around 6 plus, okay? And again, that might be a little bit different for your clinic situation. It might be a little bit higher, okay? So what's the key thing that allows us to do that? Well, the first thing, as I said, it's a great onboarding process. The reality is a lot of clinicians, they hire the therapist and they go, okay, I'm seeing 50 patients a week, let's say, for example, or you could say another way, I'm generating £100 an hour for the clinic. So in order to onboard my therapist and properly train them, that means I either need to continue to treat 50 patients or I'm going to have to block some time in my diary in order to train the therapist. So when we look at the actual opportunity cost here, here's where things go wrong. So if we look at you needing the time to develop a clinical and an onboarding process, I put that at around 65 hours, okay? Now I'm assuming you as the clinic owner, you're generating around £100 an hour. Probably is higher, it's probably a lot higher from the US, okay? So 65 plus hours of your time, that's £6,500 you could be generating, okay? Then when we hire a therapist, we need one-to-one mentoring time. So over the course of the 6 weeks, okay, or if you wanted to push that out to 12 weeks, 90 days, let's say we needed 24 hours of mentoring time to the therapist. So that's 24 hours in the first 6 weeks usually, you know, if we say it's an hour a day, Monday to Thursday, whatever, okay, just to catch up with the therapist in the first few weeks. That's going to cost the business £2,400. So you're going to block that time in your diary, you're not generating that revenue. So immediately what we have is we've got a higher wage bill and your revenue generation is dropping, okay? So that's where the conundrum happens, is now straight away the gross profit margin is reducing. And the gross profit margin is the leading indicator of a business that's heading into trouble. And we see this all the time when therapists, when we start to build our budgets for them, is they go, I want to hire another therapist here, but they massively miscalculate how much revenue is needed to generate to protect their gross profit margin. So then we also have then the actual metrics and results. So we need to make sure that we're tracking the therapist numbers, because as you hire a therapist, you now have to go from being a really great clinician to being a really good head physio to make sure that the clinic reputation is protected, that the therapist is keeping patients progressing, that they're actually getting the results that they want. So if we look at that, about 12 hours, okay, again, an hour a week over 90 days, that's costing you £1,200 in lost revenue generating time. Then you've got ongoing case support with that clinician. Let's say, for example, it's 30 hours over the 90 days, okay? So if we look at that in terms of you having to give up that time or find the time, we're looking at around £10,900 in lost revenue. And that's just from you having to give up time treating patients while their actual salary increases a little bit, okay? So the expenses is increased, the revenue generation is dropping a little bit, okay? And this is what happens with a lot of clinics, okay? Then, let's say, for example, and by the way, I've been conservative with 65 hours. It's taken me 10 years to develop the go-to-therapist clinical system onboarding process. I'm giving you 2.5 weeks to come up with all of that, okay? And it probably is going to take you a lot longer than that, okay? Then what happens, and let's assume you do a goodish job in the onboarding process and you have natural skill to be able to coach therapists, because as I said, it's a different scenario treating patients versus coaching therapists and creating behavior change. So I've mentored over 1,500 plus therapists now, myself and my team here. So I can tell you it's a completely different ball game, knowing it in your head and then getting it out, get it into someone else's head and then create behavior change, okay? Completely different ball game. So let's say you do a good job, but actually they're not quite hitting the head physio standards. So you train them up and they're hitting around a 70% initial assessment rebook rate. So for every 10 new patients they get, 3 patients don't actually rebook, or they do rebook to be nice, but they never turn up to the second session. Their cancelled did not rebook rates around 15%. And again, I'm being quite kind with that. I've seen clinics when they come into us in the go-to clinic mentorship as high as 25%, okay? And the PVA is around 3 to 4, okay? Now, let's say you do that. Now, if you don't hit the head physio targets and you do an all right job and you get clinicians, which is pretty average for a lot of clinicians when we start working with them to be that. Now, if you had done this properly in the first place and nailed the onboarding process, okay, and we had a 90% IA rebook rate and an 8% cancelled did not rebook and a patient visit average of 3 to 6, then you would have generated an additional £18,000 per 100 patients if your clinician was only charging £50. So if your clinician was also charging £100, and that's an extra £36,000 in revenue. So you can see the conundrum here as we progress through this. The clinic owner has to block more time, so their revenue generating capabilities decrease a little bit. They have to spend more time training the team. Okay, they do an all right job of that, but then the clinician that comes in, they're not as effective as the clinic owner. And now you're going to have to work even harder for more new patients because the patients are dropping off at maybe a 3 session. They've got a cancel, did not rebook at 15, whereas usually you as the clinic owner, you're used to patients coming in and you're generating an extra 18,000. Okay, and this is where that cycle starts to happen with clinicians and clinic owners, where all of a sudden, after 1 or 2 hires, they find that they're still working 60 plus hours a week because they have to maintain their caseload while their therapists are sat in empty treatment rooms, or they've got consistent gaps in their diary because they didn't do a good job onboarding the therapist. So this is where, when we actually look at this, we can see the total cost to you as of the clinic owner. You're looking at around £10,900 just to get the onboarding process over the first 6 to 12 weeks in lost revenue, or said another way, hours that you could be generating revenue for the business to protect the revenue while this person's getting up to speed. So that combined with the 18,000, remember, I'm assuming that that therapist is at £50 an hour at that stage, okay, could be double. You can see you've lost there essentially £28,900. Okay, and that's the reality. This is what's happening day in, day out in a lot of clinics. Okay, because we didn't get the onboarding process right. We don't have the head physio numbers in to track it. And this is why so many clinic owners they have this dream and vision of building a clinic where they have more freedom, they have more free time to spend with their family, they have more free time to work on the business and grow the business. But instead what they get is essentially a situation where they pay all their staff and they soon find that they're actually getting paid less than most of their staff members, that the clinic's not profitable. And I spoke to a clinic owner not too long ago, and again, I won't mention names or anything like that, but that clinic owner is coming to the end of their career and they're about to sell the clinic, okay? And they've realized that the clinic isn't worth anything, okay? Because all they had for 25 years was a job, okay? They had a business, but essentially, because they were treating all of the patients, there's very little value in the business. Yeah, there's a bit of value from the patient list and all of that, but that's not guaranteed, okay? But if you had a clinic where all your clinicians are treating the patients, and that's one of the big metrics in the Go-To Clinic mentorship, one of the big goals for us with clinic owners initially in the first round is we want the clinic owner to be contributing less than 20% of the revenue. And we want no one therapist to be contributing more than 30% of the revenue to de-risk the business. Okay, and that's what's going to get the value up on top of all your systems and your processes. Then we increase the multiple, which means then the business is a higher value for when you do sell it. Okay, so you can see hopefully now when we actually look at the numbers, this is what's happening. Okay, and again, you could increase this, and again, as I said, 65 hours to build an onboarding process that's actually going to deliver that. Okay, it took me 10 years. Okay, to do that and get that right, where we can now onboard therapists like that. Okay, if you want a copy of our onboarding process, just find me on Instagram. It's Dave O'Sullivan Physio, or look me up on LinkedIn, Dave O'Sullivan Physio. Send me a message or say, hey, watch your YouTube video on hiring new grad therapists and keeping the profit margins. And if you want a copy of our 90-day onboarding process, okay, it's actually a 6-week intensive process, and then the second 6 weeks then we use that time to fine tune. Okay, if you want a copy of our standard operating procedure that we take our clinicians through, just send me a message, let me know your situation, and I'll send that to you and said if I can help you in any way I can. Obviously, shameless plug, we have a Train My Clinician program that does this for you. Okay, so if you want, and this is the common trait of all the successful clinic owners, you get to a point where you're cash rich, time poor. And then what tends to happen to get freedom is you start investing, you spend money to free your time up, okay? Because you want the results faster. It's not about price anymore. It's about actually saving yourself time, freeing yourself up so that you do higher value work for the business, but also getting a better result. And that's what we do in the Train My Clinician, is for clinic owners that value speed of transformation and results and saves them time. So we've got a Train My Clinician pathway where your clinician can, for a fraction of this cost, can go through our exact onboarding process in 6 weeks. And we can get them well on the way to these targets then, so that they're generating an additional 18,000 per 100 patients that you give to them over the course of, let's say, 90 days or whatever it is. Okay, that's per quarter again. Okay, because if they see 300-400 new patients a year, you can multiply that by 3 or 4. Okay, that's the additional revenue it generates. So essentially the cost of the Train My Clinician, it's essentially free for you. Okay, so if you want more information about that, you can head over to the gotophysio.com. Regardless, have a look at this, have a look at the costs, have a look at your head physio numbers. Okay, we need to understand the numbers, because then you can take the emotion out of the decision making and you can work smarter, not harder. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it's given you some stuff to think about, and I hope, especially if you're in the process of hiring your first therapist, that you don't go down the rabbit hole that I've seen so many clinic owners go down. Okay, so I'll see you on the next video.